Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Putting the Horse First. My name is Isabel Salas. I am your host, and my guest here today is Claire. And Claire is going to tell us about her journey with horses and about her equine breathing system. So, Claire, before I start asking you questions about that, why don't you just tell us a little about you, about how you got into horses, and then how you maybe lead that into how you developed your breathing method?
Yeah, so I've always had horses. I didn't start very early because I lived in a suburban place, but I used to ride my imaginary horse to school. I was bitten by the bug very young, like so many of us. But what happened was I had a bad accident when I was 20, and my health went downhill after that, for a long time. And I was ill for 15 years, the last two of which I was actually bedridden. And then I came across the Buteyko breathing method. And basically, I did it. And where nothing else had helped, the Buteyko breathing method gave me my life back. And I was training to be a Buteyko practitioner, actually. And I was with my thoroughbred who had developed head shaking in his early 20s. And it was really violent head shaking. And my vet had tried all sorts of things. My vet was a homeopath, tried all sorts of things, but it was slightly better, but it was starting earlier and earlier each year. So I knew we weren't really getting to the root of it. And I suddenly realized that a horse is a mammal and has fundamentally the same breathing physiology that we do. Mm-hmm. And so the principles behind Buteyko's work should work on horses. But it's just that Buteyko would explain to people, look, you're over breathing, and that's what's causing your health problems. So follow this breathing practice and reduce your over breathing, and then you'll get better. So I couldn't really do that with the horses. So I played around with various different techniques. And because my horses head shaking was so bad, I was able to monitor the effect of what I was doing. And basically, cut a long story short, he got better. I thought, well, if it works on head shaking, probably works on other things. So I started trying it on different other things, like I think my second case was sweet itch, worked on that. And then third case was wind sucking, worked on that. And then I thought, well, I'd better make this available to people. It clearly works. And it's based on sound scientific physiology, and which seemed to work in practice. And I seem to have found a method that people, really almost anyone, can do. And it's called 1N breathing, and it's available on my website for free. You don't have to pay. So anyone can just try it, see if it works. But what I wanted to talk about specifically was this idea that when you put the horse first, my feeling is that breathing has to be a very big part of that, because it turns out that because of the physiology involved, breathing has an enormous impact on the horse, on any horse, and that people don't realize it. I mean, I've had people say to me, oh, don't be silly, a horse knows how to breathe. And that's the same for people. People know how to breathe, don't they? Well, no. Actually, no, they don't. And there's a very straightforward reason for that, which I'll come on to later. But I was thinking, about putting the horse first. We as trainers would think immediately of the 5 domains to ensure that the horse is as well looked after as possible. And those domains are nutrition, environment, health, behavior, and mental state. And when I thought about those, I thought, well, breathing is absolutely crucial to every single one. The thing is that people, because they don't realize, they don't appreciate that a horse might not be breathing as well as they could, they can be fighting against all sorts of problems that are actually to do with the breathing. And the good thing about the breathing is that it can be, over breathing can be reduced back down towards normal breathing. And that gives the physiology a chance to recover. And it's amazing, to see a horse that's been written off, for euthanasia, for whatever symptoms they've got. It's amazing to see them actually heal. So my thinking was, well, we as trainers are interested in making the horse as healthy as possible by giving them these 5 domains: the nutrition, environment, health, behavior, and mental state. And breathing can play a huge role in all 5 of those. So one of the things I think people just don't recognize that breathing is of any concern, unless they've got a horse that's got asthma. And actually, people with horses that head shake, it always surprises me because they talk a lot about overbreathing symptoms such as excessive snorting, but they don't put two and two together, and they don't understand that. They say my horse has got allergies, but they don't understand when I try and say it's because the horse is overbreathing. They don't seem to make the connection.
Gotcha.
But one of the things about training is that if you've got a horse that is finding training difficult for whatever reason, then the breathing probably is an underlying factor. And it's something that we can all address without spending any money.
Yes, without spending any money. Yes.
Exactly. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I thought if I just explained one thing that happens when you breathing, the breathing pattern is directly linked to adrenaline production and heart rate. And this is because through evolution, if you needed to run away from a lion and tiger, you had to increase your breathing. And the adrenaline was what helped you to do that, because it's no good seeing a lion and going, oh yeah, there's a lion, you have to have the adrenaline there to go, oh my goodness,
Run.
Rude there, but I managed to
That's
restrain
okay.
myself. Oh my goodness, there's a lion, I've got to get the hell out of here. So basically, if the breathing is increased, then the adrenaline production is increased. And if the adrenaline production is increased, the breathing is increased. That's a good evolutionary method. But when you think about it in terms of today's lifestyle, if the horse is in a stable and something frightens him, he's going to get an adrenaline rush. If he's not able to run away, it's a bit complicated here, I'll skim over it, but the physiology is that if you run once your adrenaline has been raised, that makes it easier for the breathing to come back down afterwards.
Okay.
So you come back down into a resting state, parasympathetic, basically. But there are many situations where the horse can't run. So the adrenaline just stays there. It's like people having road rage and they're sitting in a car.
Gotcha.
The adrenaline stays high, and so they stay in road rage. And the other way round is that if you have a horse that has started to build up symptoms such as asthma or head shaking, their breathing deteriorates, their breathing gets bigger and bigger. That causes adrenaline to be produced.
Gotcha. That makes them more
it makes them more jumpy and everything.
Yeah.
It makes them all the things that we don't want when we're training.
So when you say over breathing, you mean breathing too quickly and too shallowly?
No, I simply mean taking too much volume of air in.
Okay.
Now, the reason I said no is because horses, like humans, can actually overbreathe at very high respiration rates. That's what we would expect, high, shallow breathing. They can also overbreathe at very slow, deep breathing. That can be taking in too much. And they can also overbreathe at normal respiration rates.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So
yeah, that's why people say sometimes they've had their horse checked by the vet and they say, oh, the breathing's normal, the respiration rate's normal. It doesn't matter.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
No, the horse can still be overbreathing.
So your horse with head shaking, it's completely stopped now, or does it still head shake at times?
This is like 25 years ago. So what happened was, I think in the first year, straight away, I think it was in a couple of weeks, there was significant reduction of symptoms. He was much more comfortable. And like, as you thought, he did still head shake on days where the conditions were really bad or he was stressed. By the end of the first year, it was rare for him to head shake. And after that, it disappeared. And interestingly, so did a lot of his other problems that he'd had. He'd always been a horse that was prone to getting little fevers, if he got wet and things like that. And he was a bit arthritic because he was old. And I can't remember, to be honest, the other things that were wrong with him. But he just got a new lease of life. He was He was like a jack in the box. He just bounced all over the place at age 27 or whatever he was. And then he died at the age of 35, but he'd had a very hard life before I got him. So and he was a thoroughbred, so I thought 35 wasn't bad, really.
That 35 is pretty good. Yes, that's really cool that you had all of those results. I mean, I've had horses with heaves. We have known horses who crib. That would be interesting to try. And, I never thought about it for horses. I've worked with Mary Wallace a lot, and she does a lot. Breathing is a big part. How you properly breathe is a big part of her work. And I've done breathing work in meditation, but the idea of doing it with horses never even occurred to me.
No, well, I think the thing is that people didn't expect it to be that horses are over-breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that if they're over-breathing, you can reduce it. It's like I said, I couldn't say to my horse, look, you're over-breathing. Look, just reduce your breathing. That would be good. Even with positive reinforcement, I couldn't have done that.
That
I
would be
suppose it could actually to some extent, but this is a much more direct effect. I thought to myself, well, what would happen is if I did the reduction of the breathing myself, and I found that horses love it. They love it straight away. I mean, especially horses with asthma and things, which is, it's sort of, people find this a bit counterintuitive. They say, what? But my horse can't breathe. How can reducing the breathing help? But if you start reducing the breathing, basically you open the airways and you also enable the horse to have more oxygen. The oxygen becomes more available to the horse if you reduce the overbreathing. And horses recognize immediately overbreathing puts you into a stressful state, basically. So if you reduce it, that puts you into a calmer, more soothing state.
Interesting. All right.
The only thing is, there is a bit of a rider to that, is that particularly head shakers have got so much damage in their face. And when you start to reduce the breathing, the damage instantly starts to heal and it becomes very itchy. Like if you cut yourself, it goes through an itchy stage, you know what I mean? Or like if you have pins and needles and the blood circulation comes back, it can feel really weird. And so that was a bit of a difficulty because head shakers tend to go, and that's awful. Yeah. If you persevere, then you improve their breathing and then their muscles calm down, then they enjoy it. But funnily enough, the horses with asthma tend to enjoy it straight away. They go, oh, thank goodness for that. That's lovely.
No, that's really cool. And I've got a couple of people in my barn who I could definitely suggest this to them. One horse who just had surgery and it did improve their breathing a lot, but now she's got a bit of a chronic cough. So this is something that you can do you're doing this at the standstill with the horse on the cross ties or in the barn or just hanging out in the field?
Yes, you can. For the one end technique, I suggest people, obviously, if they're new to equine breathing and the horse is new to equine breathing, yes, definitely. I mean, being a Brit, we don't like cross ties very much.
Gotcha. Okay.
We find them a bit sort of shocking, but definitely tied up. It's very much like the positive reinforcement stuff. You don't want the horse to feel like they're being forced to reduce their breathing. They should only do it in the way that is comfortable for them. So I guess if a horse is, I'm not used to cross ties, I've never used them, but I guess if a horse is used to them, then you could do it. But you hear what I'm saying. You don't want them to be forcing them to do the one end. It's got to be something that they take part in, actively take part in, and then they will just fall asleep.
So these are all techniques that you do at the standstill? None of this is done at the walk or the trot or the canter or anything?
Well, no, because that's a very good point, because the thing is that I do have other methods. So I've got breathers, which horses can wear, and I absolutely forbid people to use the breathers when the horse is being ridden. Now, my reasoning is when a horse is active, especially being ridden, their requirement for oxygen absolutely soars up huge amounts. So it's very difficult for someone, a handler, to know how much to reduce the breathing. Breathing has to increase. I mean, obviously, a horse with problems is starting with their breathing much higher than it should be. But when they start exercising or being ridden, then their requirement will go up very high. And we don't know how much they can reduce their breathing when they're active. But that doesn't matter, because if you do the breathing training at a standstill, what you're doing is you're basically increasing fitness. You're basically increasing the body's ability to obtain oxygen from the blood and to stay in anaerobic respiration. So that's what you're doing. So if you're doing one end at a standstill, obviously you have to do it regularly, the horse will become increasingly fit, so that when they are then ridden, they're starting from a fitter standpoint.
Gotcha. No,
so you can a really nice thing to do, especially if you're doing groundwork, is you can use the one end as a reward. So you can do a couple of rounds of trot or whatever it is you're working on, and then do one end, because what it does is it calms the horse down, puts them back into parasympathetic. It also increases the oxygen availability to the brain. So if you're teaching a horse, if you increase the oxygen ability to the brain, they function better. Also, the oxygen availability to the muscles, because overbreathing decreases blood circulation. So if you reduce the overbreathing, you increase blood circulation to the muscles. And I haven't talked about it yet, but carbon dioxide, basically one of the body's main regulators, not a waste gas. That's what it's had a really bad rap. It's not a waste gas. In fact, a Dr. Singh in 2017 wrote a review of breathing. He was interested in yoga particularly. And he said at the end, so basically carbon dioxide is the breath of life. See, it's carbon dioxide that is so important. So what happens is the carbon dioxide allows muscles to relax. So conversely, if the horse is overbreathing at rest and then starts exercising and then overbreathes more when they exercise, their muscles are likely to be tenser than they need to be. So what you can do is, if you're working your horse, you can, as I say, get some sort of activity and then stop and do the one end. And that not only makes them feel better, it enables them to concentrate better. Their muscles are softer. It's a nice thank you for them.
That is very interesting. That would be interesting to mix up with R plus for horses who, if they're so enthusiastic about the treats, that it gets tricky.
Yeah.
All right. We actually have an R plus lady coming into our forum the first week of August. Yeah, the last time I was taking care of a horse who had heaves, I mean, the only thing the vet could offer me, aside from the standard over-the-counter supplements, of which there's several, they had a new kind of steroid that you had to administer. You had to actually put the thing right in the horse's nostril, and you had to click this thing, and you had to do it right when the horse was inhaling. So you had to try to time it, so you click it, you release it, and on the next inhale, and you had to do that like 6 or 10 times or something. It was quite tricky.
Well, the problem is that drugs and supplements can make it harder for a horse to heal. Because if you think about it, steroids is slightly different, but if you think about the venter pulmins and stuff like that, the things that expand the airways, if your horse is already overbreathing, if you force the airways open, it allows more air to come in and out. And the overbreathing is what causes the symptoms. So you get a vicious cycle developing. And I don't know if this is still the case, but in people with asthma, it used to be the case that if they were on a certain amount of Ventolin a week, like 3 or 4 times in a week, their asthma would get worse. Well, I mean, the thing is that with asthma, it can kill you. So if you need the drugs, you need the drugs because you don't want to die. But if you want to recover from asthma, you need to try and train your breathing back down towards normal levels. And then at some point you can stop taking the drugs, and then you'll improve even more, because as I said, drugs can make it harder, because it's not just the fact that you're increasing the overbreathing, but it's also things like healing is basically just cell growth, maintenance, and repair. It's not magic, it's just effective cellular functioning. And so that can all happen much better if the physiology is functioning well enough, because the breathing is good enough. And what happens is, when you start to reduce the breathing, this healing, cell growth, maintenance, and repair increases because it's able to. And so it produces waste products. They have to be excreted by the excretory organs, which are the skin, the kidneys, the liver, and the gut. And if you push the healing rate too fast, the excretory organs can't keep up. You basically get like a hangover. It's an internally produced hangover.
Yeah.
And so if you're giving things like drugs and supplements, unless the body absolutely needs them precisely in the form that you're giving them, which is sort of very unlikely, then those substances need to be broken down by the excretory organs. That takes up some of their capacity. So then if you're trying to heal at the same time, the healing rate is subdued because the excretory organs are already busy excreting stuff. Like, people give horses huge amounts of magnesium. Magnesium, like many things, is poisonous. So the body has to get rid of it if it's at too high doses. I mean, yes, if the body's lacking magnesium, which is again due down to the breathing, which I can explain, but that is a bit slightly complicated. But yes, if you're just replacing the magnesium that the body needs, that's fine. But if you give too much, then you're putting a burden on the excretory organs. That's why I always say to people, when they start doing equine breathing, well, firstly, they have to continue with any veterinary drugs. They must continue, because they can't you can't go from one system to the other overnight. You've got to keep up the veterinary drugs and keep giving them until you see enough improvement that you can then discuss it with your vet and ask for a step down program. But if we're talking about supplements and things, then I always suggest people put them in a bucket and let the horse take what they need, because then they're more likely to take what they actually need. And people do find, like, for example, with herbs for respiratory, as I say, which open the airways, they may be essential to begin with. But at some point, as the breathing reduces towards normal, the physiology starts to improve. The horse will know that they no longer need those and that they'll stop taking them. Yeah, they just stop.
If someone were going to try this with their horse, how often do you have to do it? How much time does each session take?
What I suggest is a recommended period, because it's a training. So to some extent, the more you do, the quicker you will heal. But that goes up to a maximum of where the excretory organs can't cope with the healing anymore. So my recommended level is about 30 minutes a day of 1N. And I suggest people do that for a week, and then they can see for themselves, because 1N doesn't cost anything. They can see for themselves whether equine breathing is working on their horse. And if they want to, and if they don't have time to do enough 1N, which is often the case, people, they just don't have the 30 minutes, then you can buy a breather, which is much more effective, because you can either leave a very mild breather on for, say, like 8 to 12 hours. So you get a very mild effect, just very gradually just reducing the breathing. Or you can get an equine breather, which you do as a designated breathing session, where the horse just relaxes and goes into a very deep healing state for like an hour or 90 minutes. And that's an equine breather. And it depends. I mean, some people, if people only see their horse once a day, then that's the equine breather is a good option. People do see their horse twice a day, or they're at a barn where the people will be happy to put the breather on and take it off, then they can go for the all-weather breather, which is the milder one.
That sounds so interesting and so accessible too. There's so many therapies out there now. My brain melted with the number of treadmills, electromagnetic zap machines. I mean, there's so much stuff out there now. It's not laser therapies. I mean, like, there's so much stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of it is extremely expensive and time. I mean, if you have to have shockwave therapy on your horse, the vet has to come here. They've got to drug your horse because the shockwave machine makes a big loud noise, and the vet has to come back over and over. They're very expensive. Yeah, there's so much stuff out there now. This is relatively very accessible and very straightforward, especially compared to all that other stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, you see, we're not doing anything outside the normal for the horse. All we're doing is bringing the horse back towards normal. You may not even get to normal because of various reasons, but even if you just bring the breathing down a bit, you can start to get improvements in the physiology. And the reason I like it is because it's not a veterinary technique. It's a training, and you don't need to, like all the stuff you were just talking about. It's like, it sounds like you need a veterinary degree to sort of understand what it is you want to do, and how to choose which one to start with. But no, I mean, equine breathing is just a very natural thing to do with a horse. Not everyone, but a lot of people find it very enjoyable, and that it increases their bond with the horse, because basically, it's like you say, putting the horse first, you're basically doing something for the horse.
That makes total sense. So why don't you tell us right now what your website is and how people can get in touch with you?
Yes, it's very straightforward. It's www.equinebreathing.com. My email is on every page, and there's loads of information there, but the basic thing is that people can just try it. They don't need to know anything, really. I mean, if their horse has symptoms of any kind, then they will be over breathing, because symptoms, by definition, mean that the physiology is not working properly. So it's always worth trying. And even if the horse is on lots of drugs, it's still worth trying, because it doesn't cost anything. And horses have this incredible power to heal if they're given the right sort of gas, which is what happens if you reduce the breathing. You bring the gas mix back into a sort of normal mix. It's like putting the wrong gas in the car,
that does not work.
It doesn't.
I've had that happen, yes. I wound up with gas in a diesel truck on accident. That was not good, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I should let you go. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, it's just I think it's a lovely podcast subject, and
Thank
I
you.
wish you all the best with it, because it's a lovely thing to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. And it leaves me a diversity. I can talk to people about all kinds of things. And your equine breathing, I love because it's so accessible for everybody and anybody with any.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, though, because people find it there's two types of people. Some kind of people find it sort of very obvious and they go, oh, yes, my horse is overbreathing. Other people find it very threatening.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I think because probably if their own breathing is poor, for humans, it's almost more difficult to reduce their breathing because the conscious mind has become involved and is looking after things and doesn't want change. So for some people, it can be very frightening. And so they say, oh, that's rubbish, but never mind, because a lot of people, it does make sense. And gradually, I'm hoping that I just would like people to understand that breathing is something that we should pay attention to.
Well, Claire, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you coming to fill in a podcast episode for me. That was awesome. And I'm also very happy to spread this out more to the world. This sounds like some great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen. I really enjoyed my conversation with Claire. I found this topic fascinating. Once again, she has plenty of resources and information on her website, www.equinebreathing.com. Thanks for listening.